Hi everybody, I'm Don Dickson and I want to welcome you back for another session on our master class. For the last time we talked, we started a new area of study, and that is the presentation of lures. Next we're going to talk about pattern trolling, which is how we go about fishing the in-between depths, sort of 14, 15, 17 feet. And if we have like a three-sided bar that only has maybe one break line or maybe two break lines, we'll throw some markers, and we end up making some straight line passes because it's too small of a structure to be able to follow it all around and keep you could do it with your boat, but you got to wonder about where is your lure. So here's where straight line passes are needed, and we're going to show you that right now.
Okay, that was a lot of fun, and I won my bet with the cameraman. Sometimes it happens that way. Again, I stated when we started, I didn't care whether or not we caught too many fish today. It's more important to me that you get the procedures, but as long as they were there, I didn't mind catching them, so that we had some fun. But as you saw, most of the fish aren't all that big. We didn't have any 4 or 5 pounders that came in. And this is typical when we're working the shallows. That's why I don't spend a whole lot of time in the shallows. But as I say, at times there'll be quite a few fish in there, and of course we had a lot of fun catching them. So, and actually from catching all those fish, they all came from pretty much the same general area of the riprap, and it gave us a clue as to what was occurring out there deeper. But I want to leave that for a moment and go to pattern trolling. This is what I use when I'm fishing the intermediate depths, and I normally consider the intermediate depths to be somewhere between 10 and 25 feet. And as I mentioned earlier in our discussion, we do not, at this point, fish all of the water, because when fish are deeper than 10 feet, they're relating to a bottom feature. So we want our lures to be on the bottom. Now, when I do this pattern trolling, again, I'm going to use Buck Perry spoon plugs. Again, it's the finest trolling lure ever built. It's also great for casting. We'll talk about that later. And again, I have no axe to grind. I'm just sharing with you that this is what I use, and the reason I use it is it allows me to go to specific depths and maintain various speeds without losing that depth control. So as I'm fishing deeper in 10 feet, the first lure that I use is a 200 spoon plug. It goes to 12 feet. Then the 100 goes to 15 feet. Then we have a 700, which runs down to 20 feet, and the 800 all the way to 25 feet. And that's with use of conventional line, monofilament line. So the important thing I want to point out, and the reason that we do this pattern trolling, is quite simple. As we get to some of our structures, and we're fishing specific features now, some of these structures are shaped in such a way that it's impossible to follow along these break lines and features by using a depth meter. There's too many turns and changes that are taking place. And many times the structures won't be all that large, it'll be relatively small. So we could maybe make a great pass with our boat following all these features, but where would the lure be? We never would know or be quite sure just where our lure was. And we know that we have to have our lure right on the feature. So the best thing to do in this particular case is to find all the outside points of the fingers or changes or turns in the main structure or in the break lines, and throw markers on those irregular features. Once I have the markers thrown, the next thing I'll do is put on a prescribed lure for whatever depth the break is occurring, and then I will make straight line passes along those markers, just making sure I hit the outside tips. This is what we refer to as pattern trolling. It's simply making straight line passes where we've thrown our markers to make sure that our lure hits these very important spots. Once I come free and come off of the structure, I'll loop the boat, do sort of a figure 8, loop the boat and make another straight line pass on the next markers. Once I come off, I'll make another loop pass and come down the side break line, making sure to make a straight pass on my markers. Then once that has been completed, I will reverse all of those passes just to be sure that I'm being thorough. And again, this is what we refer to as pattern trolling, and it's what I use when fishing structure at the intermediate depths.
Before I get started making my trolling passes, the first thing I have to do is establish the size and the shape of the structure. So I've located a bar, a three-sided bar, typical three-sided bar, that was breaking at around 15 feet. That was the primary break line. So I'm following the break line right here, and I'm throwing markers because I'm going to need to have the markers out for a reference to help me do this pattern trolling. And as you can see right there, I'm turning sort of severely out there. That was the end of the bar. It is breaking into the channel, actually into the side feeder stream channel. And now I'm coming down the other side of the bar, and I'm throwing my markers. Now when I'm throwing markers, I will always throw the markers to the inside or the shallow side of the break line. Keep in mind, when I start fishing, I want my lure on the break line. I don't want to be getting tangled up with my markers. So I'm normally throwing those markers about 15 feet inside or to the shallow side of the break line. They're nothing more than a reference point for me, although they're very, very important. Now, as you can see, I made myself laugh there. Even though we're just setting this up for demonstration purposes only, I came across a little finger there at the end, and I went and changed the marker so it would be perfect. At any rate, didn't need to do that, but in real fishing I would have done exactly what I just did. And now as I begin to fish, now that I've got my structure outlined, as I begin to fish it, I'm going to be making straight line passes, and the first pass I make, as you can see, is across the tip of the bar, the end of the bar. And I'm letting my line out there, and keep in mind when we're fishing deeper than 10 feet, which we are here, I want my lure on the bottom. So I let my lure out in the deeper water there, and as I'm making this pass, I'm feeling the lure, and when it comes up over and bounces off the tip of that bar, then I've done my job. Now in all of my pattern trolling, I will always reverse every pass that I make. There's a reason for that. I'll explain later. So here I am reversing the pass across the tip of the bar. And when my lure comes up and bumps over that bar, as soon as it comes free, starts free running, I know it's in deeper water than my 15 feet, so then I'm off the break line. I have no chance to catch a fish, so I'm now going to loop the boat. And as you can see, just by looking at the wake of the boat, you can see what I'm doing there. And I'm going to line up to make a straight line pass down the side of the bar. And in doing so, as I'm making that loop, I really want to hold my rod tip down low, and that will help force the lure back in behind my boat. I have to make sure that my lure is following my boat, and I don't want it cutting across because it's the lure that's going to catch the fish. And once I'm straightened out like I just did right there, I'm just trolling down that break line, making straight passes, using my markers as my reference. And again, once I've reached the end of that bar, and as the break line begins to peter out or turn out, I'll flip my boat around and I'll make a reverse pass right back out that same exact break line, heading out towards the end of the bar. Now keep in mind, I've got to have my lure on the bottom, especially when you're fishing for bass, and actually all species, but bass for sure. When you're fishing deeper than 10 feet, you better have that lure on the bottom if you want to catch a bass. So I'm bumping the bottom here now with a 100 spoon plug, and I will keep that pass moving until my lure walks off the end of the bar. And once that occurs, and the lure is actually in deeper water, it's out over the channel at this point, I'm now going to loop the boat as I did in the previous example. loop the boat, but now I'm going to head down the brake line, the other side brake line. And keep in mind, right now my lure's free running. It's out of position, so I've got to get back up on the bar and line up on my markers so I can make a straight line pass down the side brake line. And you can see how I loop my boat in order to do that. And the lure is in position at this point. And it's falling directly behind my boat, and I'm using my markers, which is the reason they're out there in the first place, to allow me to do a better job of fishing those brake lines. The bar, as you can see, isn't big, but it isn't small either. It does demand that we do some trolling, but there's no way we could follow the brake line around with a lure and expect it to be in position. The boat could do it, but our lure, we wouldn't know if the lure was even close. So by making these straight line passes, we know that our lure's on the brake line. And just as I did in the previous on the other side of this bar, I'm reversing that pass. In this way, I'm going to be pretty darn certain that if I don't catch a fish on a troll, and I'm confident that my markers were right, and I'm confident that my lure was right, and a lot of that is going to be with the feel. You can feel the lure. You know if it's right. You know if it's in position. And then when I walk off the end of the bar with my lure right there, I've done my job. And at that point, I just put the boat up into neutral and reel in. I've done my job. And folks, that's what we call pattern trolling.
Okay, now that'll bring us to the deep water trolling. Now, I don't want to have to throw markers and make all these loop passes and have my lure on sometimes and off some of the other times if I don't have to. And as we get to the deeper depths, that's normally 20, 25 or deeper than 25 feet on down to 60 feet, structure has a tendency to flatten out. The more ridge-like areas of structure are going to be up in the shallows, and the deeper you go, the more it tends to flatten out and get quite large. So by using my depth sounder, normally I can just follow along that brake line pretty well and make the turns that I need to make. I couldn't do it up in the intermediate depths or the shallow areas, but normally downstairs that can be done. So as long as I can do that, I will. And all that means is that we have to use our depth sounder, and where it starts to break off, we correct the boat back in. As it comes back to the brake line, we turn back off into the deep, and so on and so forth. And that's just the way we follow the brake lines. Now, a lot of fishermen have told me that in trying to follow brake lines, they're having some trouble. And they can't seem to effectively keep a lure on the drop-off or on the brake line in the deeper depths. Certainly this is easy to understand because the deeper you go, the longer the lines you have to run and the bigger the lures, and everything becomes a little bit more difficult as far as controlling exactly where that lure is. So we do have to get to a point where by using the meter we can keep the lure right on the spot. And the best way to learn how to do that is to get good, where's my little lures here, to get good at contour trolling. If you can contour troll, then you're going to end up learning how to do the deeper stuff and keep a lure in position. It's sort of like crawling before you walk. Very difficult to keep a lure right on the money at 35 feet if you can't troll effectively in 6 feet. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Let's say I threw my tackle box here over the bank or over into the water here in about 4 feet of water, and I ask you to hit that on a trolling pass with a lure. You probably do it 10 times out of 10. But if I drop that box right there into about 60 feet of water and say, now let me see you hit it, see, everything becomes more difficult. So we learn how to troll by contour trolling. It teaches you all you need to know about boat control and where your lure is and feel and all of those things that are important. Then once we get out to the deeper stuff, the same basic procedure of boat control and all of that will remain the same. The only difference is we're using our depth sounder to help us stay right on that feature or brake line that we want to fish. Okay, Now I'm going to demonstrate to you how to follow a break line with the depth meter. This is what we need to be doing in the deeper depths. I've come out here across this flat and I find out that we're breaking to the main river channel at a depth of 20 feet at this area. So my lure of choice is 700 spoon plug, which goes to 20 feet, and I'm going to drop that out and we're going to follow along this 20-foot break line. I'm going to show you just how we do it. Okay, I have my lure down there bumping, and we're seeing 20 feet on a depth sign. And see, I let it go a little bit right there just to show you the break. Already we're in 22 feet. So when I see it go deeper, I'm going to go ahead and correct back in towards the break line until I see it steady at 20 feet again right there. And then I'll slightly angle the boat outward again. Now this is the exact procedure that I will use for trolling any break line, regardless of the depth. It could be 20 feet, could be 35, it could be 47. It doesn't matter. So now I'm at 20 solid. I've turned the boat out again, and as soon as I see it start to go off, like right there, I go ahead and make the change and correct back. When I see the meter get a little bit deeper than 20, I'll cut back into the break line or to the shallow section of the break line. And then when I see it come back to 20, I'll go ahead and cut back out towards deeper water. Now I must continue to maneuver the boat in this fashion, because if I don't, I could be just sitting up here on a 20-foot flat. Now there's just a stump or something I came across. So I must establish that it's still breaking. All right, now there's our break line right there. We've already established it's breaking 20 feet. And as soon as I see that rascal break, like right there, I'm going to go ahead and correct back towards the shallow section or the actual break line. Now there it is right there at 20 feet. As soon as I see 20, I'm going to correct back the other way towards deeper water. Now the key here is to not make severe corrections with the boat, but subtle corrections. And if we react instantly when we see the depth sounder change, we don't have to make a severe correction. All we have to do is react instantly. Now I'm falling right on that break line, but I have to see a little deeper water. Now there it goes right there. If I don't allow it to go into deeper water, I could be out traveling across a 20-foot flat. So I have to keep establishing by turning and correcting the boat that it is in fact breaking into deeper water like it did right there. And now I've corrected back to the break line, and there's my 20-foot again. So as soon as I see 20, I'm going to send her back towards the channel again to establish that I'm still on the physical break line, because that's where the fish are going to be. Now there you see I got a little bit high. It came to about 19.5, but there's my break line again. And the key here is, if I'm doing a good job at this, I'm never going to be more than 6 inches off one way or the other. Certainly my lure is not going to be more than 6 inches off. So my depth sounder might change a foot or even 2, but with a long line out there, if I make an instant correction, my lure is going to stay right on the break line. And we're following along here just perfectly. And this is the procedure we need to use regardless whether that break line is at 20 feet, 25, 35, or 45. Our boat control and reaction of the depth sounder and what it's telling us will remain the same. We simply turn off the break line until we see it get a hair deeper, and then we'll correct back in until we get back to the break line. And again, I never want to see my needle swinging more than a foot either way. If it's swinging more than a foot, then I'm not doing a great job. Now there I'm in 21, my lure's right on the break line, and I have to correct back now to the 20 feet. And folks, that's all there is to it. That's how you follow a break line.
So at any rate, that was quite long again today, but I hope you got a lot out of it. It was our beginning of our study on trolling, and it's just the beginning. But it at least gives you a foundation when I talk about contour trolling, pattern trolling, or following a deep break line in that technique in trolling. You'll know what I'm talking about. So with all that being said, thanks for being with me today. I appreciate you. You know that. I want you to like us on Facebook, and be sure to hit that little red button and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already done it. And we appreciate you all for watching. We'll see you the next time.